listening to In-Fisherman Storyline, North America's top voice in multi-species freshwater angling. Here is your host, Thomas Allen.
Hey folks, Thomas Allen here with In-Fisherman, and before we get started today, I wanted to pass along some exciting news as we welcome LL Bean as presenting sponsor of In-Fisherman Storyline podcast. LL Bean is an iconic brand known for its quality outdoor gear and a deeply rooted passion for everything outside. Not to mention they make a pretty mean plaid flannel shirt. Check this thing out. Awesome. This partnership will bring more great stories, expert tips, and outdoor inspiration to anglers everywhere. LL Bean, we are glad to have you a part of this. So welcome to the palatial LL Bean Studios nestled atop the twin In-Fisherman Towers overlooking beautiful downtown Brainerd, Minnesota. Stay right there. A new episode of In-Fisherman Storyline presented by LL Bean is coming right up. Man, that's got a nice ring to it. Steve Jonesi, welcome to Brainerd. Welcome to In-Fisherman Storyline.
I tell you what, thanks for having me. Kind of like a dream come true, man.
You know, it is for me too. And if you recognize Steve, that's because he appeared on a previous episode. We went to Andy Meyer's Lodge together to film a segment of In-Fisherman TV. And we did a podcast up there with Herbie and with Julian, and just a what a great experience, what a great place. And if you haven't listened to that podcast, I suggest you go back. There's a lot of great musky talk. Herbie's a legend.
Yeah, without a doubt.
I mean, you get that guy talking, you're going to learn something.
Be a sponge.
That's right.
Take it all in.
But I knew, I've known Steve for, it's been over 20 years. I think a long time. But we met at I think I started at Gander Mountain in Cedar Rapids right around the time it opened. But you were kind of a part of the initial crew that was brought in to get the store opened up. And I was hired after the store was open, but it was early on. It was right away. And right. Steve is a renowned, legendary in his own mind, if not.
Yeah, right. But legendary. I don't know if I go that far.
but a musky guide for a long time and has a great story. And we're going to dig into that tonight. So welcome, everybody. Thanks for being a part of In-Fisherman Storyline. And we're going to dig right in. And Steve, let's start out at Gander Mountain. I was, 20 to 21 years old, I think.
Youngin'.
I was a youngin', barely probably growing. Just a baby. But you had come off a pretty interesting, tenure as a guide, right? Or was that after Gander?
Well, that was before Gander.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was before. I moved. Well, I was divorced in 2004. Got an opportunity to work at Thorne Brothers, world-renowned tackle shop. Moved up to the cities, working at Thorne's, started a guide service on Mille Lacs, and that was the heyday of Mille Lacs.
It was
going nuts.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that's where I started. You know, I'd always been, even since I was a little kid, I was taking people fishing. I was taking the neighbors fishing, whatnot. So I guess it was a natural progression.
It was a natural progression, but you were very approachable. I mean, I wasn't quite a snot-nosed kid, but not far from it. And if I think in those days were my introduction to musky fishing. I caught my third musky ever on Palo, nice. Which is not too far from the Cedar Rapids downtown there. And I mean, you were. It didn't matter if I had a question about what to do or where to go. You were quick to talk about it, and it's like you had this desire to foster the passion of musky fishing.
Well, you know, and that's, I was lucky, going to shows, and I tell people today, with musky shows or sport shows, go there, okay, yeah, the baits are cool and the gear and all that. Talk to people. Yeah. You get an opportunity to talk to these guys in their setting, ask questions. Stand there and listen. Mm-hmm. Be a sponge. Aside from gathering, the information and learning, what a great opportunity. And and everybody started somewhere.
You have to start somewhere.
Yeah, we all started somewhere.
Mm-hmm. And we were all kind of stupid at those early days. Like you can't make numbers of consecutive perfect decisions as an early and a young angler. You have to make mistakes, and that was a huge part about learning everything.
And that's it. I look back now. I mean, we had trips to Lake of the Woods. We didn't catch fish, man.
Lake of the Woods.
Lake of the Woods.
Yeah.
Like, what? This was late 80s, early 90s. We're running 20 minutes to this spot and 20 minutes to that spot. We're running a 14-foot Lund with a 25 Merc at the time. you know.
That's a bumpy ride on Lake of the Woods.
And now, I mean, I put the boat in, I drop the trolling motor, I idle spot to spot to spot to spot. You know, it's a whole lot different, but you've learned.
Yeah, well, it comes with trial and error. It comes with stubbing your toe, but somewhere along the line, you have to be open to hearing what other people have to say. You have to be willing to consider other tactics or approaches, or understanding that there are people that have tenure on you, and you need to invest in that.
Well, and that's a really good point. And those people that do have this tenure and experience, they need to offer it and share it.
Yeah.
You know, when I mean, how I got back into guiding, 2020, the Rona hits, I get laid off. Mom starts home hospice in northern Wisconsin. I move up there to help take care of her. A couple months later, my position's eliminated. Mom passes. Okay, I'm 54 years old. I don't have a job. What am I going to do? What do I have to offer?
You got an experience, though.
I got experience with some stupid fish, you know? Was it the Red Hot Chili Peppers? Give it away, give it away, give it away now.
Yeah, but see, that all came from something. That came from a desire to share the experience.
That's it, and teach.
Yeah.
I mean, and about the guiding thing, that's what I love the most is the teaching aspect, you know, and sharing, you know, almost 50 years of experience on the water with people, whether they're just starting or, you know, whether they've been fishing for years. I mean, those days in the boat, they're golden.
They're golden, but they started somewhere. So take me back to this. This is cool, actually. In this very studio, we've had a number of Chicago native, born and raised people that have told their story, including Al Linder, sat right where you sat.
I tell you.
And we've had Tom Newstrom. There's a group of Chicago-based people. There seems to be something in the water in Chicago that breeds good anglers.
That northern Illinois, Chicago, that was, you know, we talk in college football, the coaching cradles. That was a fishing cradle. Minneapolis is a fishing cradle later on. But all those guys, Tony Portancaso and Spence Petros, and, you know, and reading the Fishing Facts magazines. But how I got started with it.
Did you trespass on golf courses?
Rose Hill Cemetery. Peterson and Western.
Okay.
Yeah. But you know what? The freaking guy carried a salt gun. And they occasionally, if we weren't stealthy enough, he would chase us out of there with a salt gun. I never got shot with a salt gun.
Well, they kill flies. That's a thing now you can buy. Have you seen those things?
I've seen those.
Yeah, if you got a cabin around the area and got a black fly problem, shoot them with salt.
Right, salt.
But I mean, so you were definitely like digging into finding your path in life as a youngster in the Chicago region, and you know there are places to catch muskies, but there's fishing opportunities there.
Well, and back then, I mean, I was lucky. My grandparents stayed at a resort in northern Wisconsin, Lang Lake County, Upper Post Lake. They bought a cabin on that lake, early 70s. My parents ended up buying a place next door, late 70s. I paid more for my first Toyota truck in college than they paid for that cabin back in the day, 79, I think it was. But my brother and I were lucky. We were, you know, exposed at an early age to the woods and the waters, and literally, you know, took to it like a fish to water. You know, it was either in, on, or near the water.
One of the things I love to ask people when we were talking about the early days of fishing was, like, is there a first encounter that like you can think of, an early encounter that impacted the rest of your life? Was there a moment that you can trace back that made Steve Jonesi who he is today?
Who I am today?
I mean, that's a deep question, but
that's a deep question. Who I am today. You know what? It's you know, they're through pain, honestly. Story time. We're telling a story.
Well, let's have it.
My dad buys a bass boat in winter of 80. He buys a Charger 175V bass boat from a guy out of Chicago, out of Berwyn. He was a Berkeley rep. So he buys the boat. It's got a 150 Black Max on it. I mean, they timed it or clocked it on a Fox chain at 73. Dad wasn't a speed guy
in
at
80.
all.
1980.
In 1980.
Oofta.
So he buys the boat. Spring of 81, we go up. We're going to open the cabins. grandparents' cabin, who my Uncle Tony now own, and next door is our cabin. So we do our raking, we do all our spring chores, just chomping at the bit to put the boat in the water. And this is April 11th of 81. Ice had just gone out on the lake, upper post, 3-4 days before. Water was probably upper 30s, 40 degrees. Anyway, we get the boat in the water. They had trouble getting it started, da-da-da. And a little while later, get the boat going. Uncle Tony's in the driver's seat. Everybody goes inside. Dad's sitting on the floor of the boat. And I'm standing on the boathouse watching him go. Well, he pulls out of the bay, and he makes a loop, and he's going down the center of the lake. And there's a little point that's stuck out. And because it was April, there was no foliage. You could see through it. And all of a sudden, I see the nose of the boat go straight up in the air.
Oh, no.
So I start calling for my mom and my aunt. They come out. My brother and I take the 14-foot Starcraft, throw it in the water out of the boathouse, get the 9.9 Johnson on it, get that thing going. We buzz across to where the boat had settled across the lake, opposite direction. Aunt thought she saw somebody moving in the boat with the binoculars. Nobody in the boat. There was a floating life jacket in the boat. So we go over where I saw this happen. I see my dad head bobbing. So my brother and I are trying to grab him, get him in the boat. Kid from across the lake had seen it. He had rowed a John boat out there. He was 16 years old. He got my dad in the boat, and my brother and I kept looking for Tony. Subsequently, find Tony the next day, after the sheriffs and the divers found him the next day. Or not the divers, friends of ours dragging a 4-foot lead, steel pole with big hooks on it. So long story short, Tony passed. Things changed. My aunt ended up suing us. The whole family disowned us. So that kind of changed, the trajectory, I guess. I was in 7th grade. My brother was in 8th. Just another, I guess, experience on the water. And that's why safety on the water's always been, for me, a big thing. But, yeah, I guess that would be,
You have a deep emotional connection to the water.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Without a doubt.
For sure. And I probably shouldn't have been in one of those boats that was out looking for him, because that scene, when they pulled up that pipe or those hooks and by the back of his windbreaker, and then to see him on the slab at the boat landing with the coroner, crushed, man, crushed. And then to see my parents and what it did to the family and all that. But I grew, and I guess my appreciation, respect for the water and Mother Nature, kind of grew from that.
There's a lot of stories we tell on this show, and not all of them are going to be big fish glory. And
dude, I've never told that story. And how I didn't break up telling the story that's the other thing, because that one was tough. I mean, I would come home from school, and I'd have to, I'd walk in the kitchen. We lived in an apartment in Chicago, and my mom's sitting there crying at the table because she got some more, something from the attorneys. I mean, just craziness.
But it is complicated as a situation, complicated and tragic as a situation like that, is it still has an impact on you of, you talked about safety, but it kind of represents life in a way, right? Like we're human, mistakes happen, and
accidents
happen, and it's not something that you ever plan for, but to have the drive that you have today to chase after the most complicated fish to chase in freshwater in the North American continent, the muskie. I kind of feel that there's an element of, you have to overcome those hard times to get to the glorious moments.
Oh,
and that might have been the first one.
Turned away from, boating and fishing and in the water and all that. But it's what we loved. And, growing up in Chicago in a concrete jungle, I mean, it was always, when are we going to Post Lake?
Did you guys go back after that accident?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
we kept our place. My aunt kept the other place. You want to talk about awkward? I mean, we were intertwined all the time with the kids and da 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 da, and then it was pretty awkward for a while.
I suppose. So that part of the country, I suppose in those days there was what kind of mapping was available? Was there anything?
Nothing.
Just driving across open water?
Oh yeah, it was just driving across the water. There was no, the maps that were available. There was a company out of Wisconsin, Clarkson Map Company. I think there might have been some rudimentary, basic maps. Hotspots came out a few years later.
Yeah, but to think about where we're at today, I mean, as we just published, probably a month ago, the 50th anniversary edition of In-Fisherman magazine, where we kind of went through a list of game-changing moments, right? That's a word in the industry we're all tired of, game changers.
Game changers.
Gets thrown around too much. But you look at probably one of the most influential or most heaviest impact on the industry, I think, was high def and detailed contour mapping.
You know what? I agree.
That changed a lot of stuff.
Oh, geez. From the Mille Lacs days. I mean, you could literally, at 2 o'clock in the morning, be absolutely perfect nuts on 3 mile.
Yeah.
3 miles out.
Or for that matter, drive your boat back to the ramp on
safely
on
right.
on pad and being able to see what's going on, which is still probably not something we'd recommend, but you could do it with the mapping. And I think that we'll get into this a little later, but there's a lot of controversy today about technology, and I think that if you want to really pinpoint something that
changed the game,
it would have been mapping.
Remember Loran C?
Yeah. I didn't have one of those, but I remember that.
I still triangulate.
Oh, I do too. And my son, I've talked about him on the show a bunch. I wouldn't say that he's spoiled, but he certainly has a lot of technology that I did not have.
Right.
And there was a day, I think you and I are both probably examples of, the cross-generational technological impact, right? We had to line up the willow tree and the striped boat ramp and, this big oak tree over here, get it all together. We didn't think it was a perfect science, but by God, it worked to where you could get close enough to make the right cast.
Here's an example from almost 5-6 years ago. I'm out on PC down by us, and I'm trolling. I've got a 10-inch headlock on a board, and they were drawing the lake down because they were going to do a big renovation, $3.5 million renovation project. So my bait hooks up. I work on that thing for 20 minutes, half an hour. I cannot.
Not a cheap lure.
No. So there's my perch 10-inch headlock down there. Fast forward, this is probably early June. Fast forward, we didn't fish in the summer, it's too hot. August, early September, Carrie and I go out there. It's dead flat calm, beautiful day. We're heading up to the north, or to the west arm, and I look, and there is this little stick out of the water, sticking out about a foot.
How long afterwards?
This is 2-3 months.
You got to be kidding.
And the water's been dropping,
Yeah.
So I'm looking, I see the stick. We get up to it, and I had triangulated. And I looked on shore at the rock and the tree, and then that's it. That's the tree. Well, we get next to it, and thank God it was calm. Grab that tree, one hand. I take my big net with the other, and I start jamming it down the shaft of that tree. First pull.
You're kidding.
My headlock.
You brought it back.
Unbelievable. First pull. Oh. And it had caught some fish, so it had a few exposed marks.
You knew it was yours.
I had to dry it out. I touched them up. That thing still catches fish.
So that particular lake, were you near the dam?
No, this was before the neck down, going up to the west down.
Okay, I remember.
Power lines up there.
Yeah, the power lines are always a popular area. But so, old story, I was trolling a 13-inch grandma in front of the dam on that lake. And it was one of those, at that point in time, we had no kids. We had hardly any money. And you're trying to build like this musky lure collection. Like,
you're right.
It's a bad thing to have. And so I bought these 2 grandmas. I still have this lure today. And I was trolling in front of the dam, got hooked up on a rock, and before I could get the boat turned around and get myself squared away to fix it, it broke off. It broke its leader. My knot broke. And I was like, oh gosh, my wife just blessed me buying these lures, and I spent $80 on 2 baits. It's stupid. I got to go tell her I lost one. And so I went and cast it around, that bay that runs to the north. That's just would be just west of the dam and north.
Right.
So I went up in there, nothing came back, and I'm like, oh, I can't believe this. Whatever. Still grumpy about it. So I see it floating.
That bait's floating.
It popped up.
Nice.
And I went and picked it back up. But I mean,
nice.
There were those kinds of experiences. It's like there's negativity attached to it. There's failure attached to it. But you got to just put your chin down and keep going.
Absolutely. And in what we do in dealing with Mother Nature, there's going to be disappointment. There's going to be fish that get off. There's going to be
days where you don't see a fish.
You don't see a fish. Equipment breaks. There's a couple times a season, I'll tell you, I'm selling it all. I'm done. This is stupid.
Yep.
Fish are stupid. I'm out. No more.
Oh, I can tell you. Same thing. I feel like as musky anglers, we're probably more bait collectors than we are like strategic bait connoisseurs.
I've tried. I've participated in a couple 12-step bait buying programs. Failed a couple.
Swap meets, Facebook Marketplace.
But I'm good now.
Yeah.
I'm good.
Yeah, but when you do get one, that's like, when you do catch a fish that's, you've probably had some numbers of just world-class fish you've encountered, and that bait, oftentimes, you might keep using it, but there's a part of you that's like, I need to probably hang this up on the mantle. This particular bait has paid for itself in this one fish.
Well, I start looking at the baits on the wall, and it's like after almost 50 years of accumulation and spending time in the business and having friends and gifts and, this and that. Oh, I can't get rid of this bait. Caught this fish on it, or so-and-so gave me this bait, or, they've all got, something.
They got meaning.
My dad had a book when I was growing up. It was Howard Levy, Man versus Muskie, and I still have it, actually. But he had highlighted, underlined in this book a line that is something to the effect of a musky fisherman handling his baits is equivalent to Midas fondling his gold. Mm-hmm. I'm like, perfect. Still.
So some of the musky anglers I've been around, and I'm certainly I'm committed, but I wouldn't consider myself exclusive or maybe a little bit hardcore, but not quite. I have a decent collection. I love the fish more than about any fish I chase, but other things have kind of, I won't say redirected, but I have other fishing priorities as well.
For sure.
And I'm all right with that. But I've been in some man caves or musky angler shops, and Tracy Crail, a mutual friend of ours, has a pretty impressive musky shop, and he spends a good deal of winter sharpening hooks, replacing O-rings, welding plastic baits back together. Like it's an obsession that I think transcends from the water all the way into the off season, in the post season.
Oh, without a
maintenance
doubt.
And keeping stuff ready, and then when you get ready to go, you make sure everything's ready in the right position, whatever. So there's to have that type of bait collection where lures probably average $45 or better. You need to take care of that stuff.
Oh, absolutely.
And they'll take care of you.
And the storage solutions that are available now are awesome.
I don't know that there is a more obsessive group of anglers than musky fishermen, and I've been around them all. I think that's probably the top of the heap.
And part of it, I think, because they are so difficult to catch, any advantage that we think or that will give us a little bit of confidence, I'm in. What do I got to do?
You got to control what you can control.
Right.
And I think that you're right. You have a giant fish. You've got a fish that's known to eat at your feet with 12 inches of line out. You have a fish that might eat at the end of the cast while you don't have any pressure on your line. There's so many things that could go wrong. So if you got sharp hooks, if you've got the right size hooks, if you can...
so many details.
And I've fished with guys that keep a file in their pocket, and if they hit a rock, if they touch a rock, they grab their bait and they check the hook points, and okay, this one needs straightened out. Like, and a lot of these guys, those hooks are... they're worn down because they've been sharpened so many times. and it's obsessive, but I think that what makes muskies so intriguing is the mystery, is the times when you fish days on end for barely a follow, and then when it all comes together, you couldn't have done anything wrong in those moments because you're dialed. And I'm guilty of being asleep at the wheel after long days. We've been together when this has happened.
We've all been there.
You're like, man, this has been a brutal day. And that's when the fish are like,
oh, of course,
I'm going to show up and screw this guy's days up. So you kind of got to
surprise.
You better be ready, right? So that means control the controllables. And I think if there's something you take from our conversation tonight, that might be the number one nugget. Walleyes, largemouth, salmon, muskies, any species that you prefer to chase, you better control the controllables, because if you neglect those things, it might cost you on a really big fish.
Right. Yep. Little things can make a big difference.
So let's go back to your youth a little bit here. We're in the In-Fisherman offices here in Brainerd, Minnesota. Thanks for making the trip up. By the way.
Bet.
This is a special place for me. I've told you the story. I've told it on this podcast a bunch of times. I'm going to run through the abbreviated version again. But when I was in fourth grade, we moved from Wisconsin to Iowa, and I was struggling with adapting and coming around to the new environment and making new friends and whatever. And, my dad knew I was ate up with fishing. So he got me one of the In-Fisherman tapes, a VHS tape that was probably at Walmart. It was a greatest hits, if you will, that had
nice.
It had a segment of the catfish fever. It had Doug chasing walleyes and probably the river here in Brainerd at night with a keep sack. You remember the keep sack?
You know how many times we have recited lines
Yes.
from that original Muskie video?
Oh, the greatest musky.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, I can repeat
That's
it.
right. I said calendar periods. And they're
periods.
a lot different than the calendar periods you and I live by.
You know what?
For example.
Black's a good color.
They'll bite on that.
They'll bite on that.
Oh, yeah, man.
But see, that impacted me. That video impacted me, and I knew after I made it through that video probably 327 times that I wanted to do this and be a part of this community and work in the industry and whatever it was. And I mean, you had a similar experience. You were exposed to the In-Fisherman formula, right? The F plus. See, I'm going to get this wrong now that I'm on the spot, but the fish plus location plus presentation equals success,
without a doubt.
So, what was your early In-Fisherman?
My early In-Fisherman exposure was the magazine before it even had color. Color covers.
Yeah, you said something like pre-Topol.
Yeah, pre-Larry Topol.
Oof.
My dad, it was between Fishing Facts, and that kind of goes back to that Northern Illinois, the group, the Linder brothers and that. But started with Fishing Facts and then In-Fisherman. And I remember as a kid for a birthday getting an In-Fisherman, like a new subscription, but it came with the book. And it wasn't a book, but it was the formula for success. And I, in my fishing, whatever it was, I always looked at that. Between that and then the teachings of Buck Perry, and Fishing Facts and his whole spoon plugging thing and location and that. Yeah, that's where I got it.
Well, the interesting thing when you compare today to those years is you can find information, and it's probably largely correct and applicable today at the snap of a finger, where you could search Google.
Back then.
But you had to wait for that magazine to show up in your mailbox. And
hopefully it had a Muskie article in it this month.
Yeah, but that was the Bible. That was the encyclopedia of fishing. And Doug Stange has sat in this room and told me numbers of times, like, that was a collection of probably the greatest anglers in North America contributing to the education factor of what In-Fisherman stood for, the science.
Huge.
It really...
Absolute foundation.
It was a foundation.
Of where we are right now.
It was my foundation.
Yeah.
Your foundation.
Mine too.
You know where Tiffin is, right?
Oh, sure.
Okay, so there's a lake right there, Kent Lake.
Kent Park.
That's right. So my very first Texas rig bass
was out of Kent Park.
Wow. And I can take you to the little bridge that went over. There was a trailer on the lake, wasn't it? Lake? And I could take you to the rock that I stood on, and I casted that Texas rig motor oil power worm into that little area. And I remember I can remember it as vividly as my kids being born. That thump, the tension, and the hook set. And I'm like, I learned this.
From there.
From reading the magazine.
So here's one for you. I catch and release my first legal Wisconsin muskie, September 25th, 1977. I'm fishing with my dad. I got a Sampo ball-bearing swivel attached to a 7-inch perch or yellow suic, 5'3" Fenwick lunker stick, the old brown one.
5'3"
It was a spinning rod.
broom pole.
Oh, no,
Yeah.
it was a spinning rod.
Oh, spinning rod.
Yeah, with a Cardinal 4 spooled with 12-pound stren. So catch this fish, release the fish. I still have the rod, reel, and lure. But here's the kicker. That winter, we go to the shows, the sports shows in Chicago. I got to meet my hero, my idol, Al Linder. He signed the back of the picture. Here's the kick. This is crazy. We didn't laminate anything. We didn't have lamination or anything back then. I took Scotch tape, and I taped it front and back over that picture. I still have it. It is not yellowed at all.
You got to send that to me.
That's
picture that.
I got a picture of it on my phone. That's from winter of 1978. He signed that picture. The fish was 31 inches long. It wasn't a monster or anything.
Yeah, but that
was
something.
Yeah, to see Al Linder at the show. He was doing a seminar at the show that winter. I'm like, oh my goodness.
Here's one for you. Similar vein. So we had moved to Iowa, like I told you, and my dad was interested in the outdoors. He knew that was important to me, and we had met a neighbor where we lived that also loved to fish. In fact, was from Wisconsin, had some musky history.
Nice.
And so we decided one year, and again, I'm guessing 5th, 6th, 7th grade at the earliest. Or at the latest, so I was still pretty young. And we went to the Quad City Expo.
Oh yeah,
which
still going on
for our Iowa roots. We know that was a hopping show, but back in the day, God, those trade shows were so jam packed full of people. Parking spots were on sidewalks, and they were selling $3 parking.
It was like
5 blocks
Christmas
away.
morning.
It was
going
so
to that
much
Rosemont
fun.
show back in the day.
It
or
was
a show at the old Chicago amphitheater. Oh my goodness.
I didn't ever make it to a Chicago show. That's another story. But so the Quad City Expo, we go and we're walking around, and I feel like I was in. I couldn't tell you the brand, but I was looking at beetle spins and spinner baits, and I was just looking at all the lures and the booths everywhere, people selling stuff, and I hear this come from through the crowd, make way, and here comes 3 cops pushing people aside because it was elbow to elbow the whole aisle, pushing people around, and here came Al Linder, Dave Sanda, and Dan Sura.
We got the In-Fisherman boys.
I mean, we're talking like the Joe Montana, Jerry Rice combination.
Exactly.
Roger Craig, right?
They're coming through.
The crew, they're coming through. And I was like, oh, man. Managed to make it over to the seminar booth because that's where they were headed. And I wanted to hear some of the stuff that they were talking about.
Right.
Steve, there was no place to sit. People were sitting on the floor. They were just so thirsty for the information. Yes, and I the big purpose of this podcast from the inception of it is to kind of tell the stories of those discovery years, as the In-Fisherman crew called it. Like they were figuring out how to catch walleyes in the river, largemouth in the pads, muskies in Lake of the Woods and uncharted waters, and they wanted to present that information to us, and it almost bestowed upon me, and I know it did you too, a desire to become good at fishing, so that I'm able to share that experience with other people
and give it back to other people. Give it back. How can we give back? I wish I hit that lottery. I'd give a bunch away. This is how I can give back.
Right.
And I give back in a lot of other ways too. But this fishing thing,
the joy it brings to people that you take out on your boat it's worth everything.
For me, it's helping people make memories.
Mm-hmm.
And if I can play a small part in that father, son, whoever, boyfriend, girl, in their happiness and their memories, blessed beyond measure.
Well, let's step back to your Mille Lacs days. There's a particular story. In fact, I think I knew you before you guys caught this fish, and then tell me if my timeline's right. Were you guiding on Mille Lacs post Gander Mountain?
Pre.
So before that is when you caught that real big
Right.
fish. Okay, so that was a fish that kind of was a staple for you, and I want you to tell that story.
Boy,
that was
that
in the
one.
Mille Lacs heydays.
No, October 6th of 06, night of the full moon. Had fished all day. We hadn't raised a fish. And it was a breezy kind of day. Wasn't rolling or anything. So we pull up on, and I'll give the spot, I don't care. We pull up onto Shaw's Reef. Shaw's Reef is a spot that I used to say, this is where 50 inchers go to get caught. Because I think in all those years, caught one fish under 50 inches on there. So we start on the one end, and it's kind of a south wind. It's rolling into it. So I got a 620 tiller, Yamaha tiller. I'm on the tiller. Got Jody and his buddy Derek chucking bombs.
What are they throwing?
Bucktails. And it's 7:30 at night. And I've got my GPS, so I'm seeing that we're coming toward the end of the reef. And Jody makes a cast, and I see the rod load, and I just glance at the GPS, and where his cast landed, there were no rocks. He was off the edge of it. So I knew it was fish. Well, the week before, sitting in the living room, we're fishing rocks at night. You got to get baits going slow. And double tens were new at the time. Well, I started doing some chopping, and I made a bait that had 3 hooks. It was jointed, but it had 4 Star Flash silicone skirts. And I put all hollow beads in there for spacers. So this thing was like, probably 12 inches long, 13 inches long. But it was really buoyant. You could work it slow. So that's what the fish ate. So I see the rod load, fish is on. I put the motor in neutral, get the net, scoop the fish. Fish is in the bag. Awesome. High fives, everything. Do you think she's 50? Oh, yeah, that fish is 50. But I had no idea. Hadn't seen, it was wide. Well, then
that kind of takes away sometimes from your perception, doesn't it? Like you get a really wide fish in the net, it almost looks shorter.
It did. It didn't. I knew it was 50, but I didn't think it ended up being what it was. So I reached down into the net and grabbed the fish, and the fish goes on its side, and I immediately let go. I'm like, this thing is a mutant. I'd never seen anything like it. That fish was a foot plus deep.
Whew.
I mean, just crazy. So I get out, didn't have a tape, didn't worry about girth measurements back then. So I cut line, put the line around it. Too short. Got cut line again. Cut the line, put it around it, get what I thought was a good measurement, pinch it off, put it on the bump board. It was 30 inches. Pull the fish out of the net. Fish was 54 inches long. Unbelievable. So we ended up releasing that fish. I was in the water with the fish as it swam away. Probably shouldn't say it now, but we actually weighed that fish on a crappy old spring scale. And it bottomed the scale out. It was a rusty old spring scale. Bottomed it out at 54.
Dude, what a fish.
Formula had that fish between 58 and 61 pounds. 54 by 30 is what it was. Yeah, I was in shock. Totally in shock.
I know you've often reminisced about that fish on social media, like on the day. I mean, typically you're good for the October 6th post. I've looked forward to it, but that was a life changer.
That was a real boost for the business. Yeah, because when I moved up there, started guiding, like, who's this guy? Some guy from Iowa?
Yeah, what? Iowa, bud.
Who's this guy?
You grow potatoes down there,
right? Huh? Idiots out walking around. Iowa? What?
I'm from Iowa, so I can say that.
Right. But yeah, that fish was another game changer.
But that moved something in you, didn't it?
It did. And really that was kind of, I don't know, put my guide service on the map. Had been, working, taking people fishing, but something like that, when then the magazines get a hold of it. And, Derek, the guy who actually took that picture, 3 weeks later, he's on a business trip down in Mexico for work. They're sitting out around the pool, and the guy next to him says, "Dude, look at this." He shows him the picture of the fish. Derek turns to him and says, "Yeah, I took the picture." Dude's like, "Look at this muskie."
I mean, but
Yeah.
that was the days of just like it wasn't necessarily viral, but it was that word got
Kinda.
around. People
Yeah.
that was like the ultimate word of mouth viral where it spread. I heard about it, and
But
I
it
was
was-
like, oh, Steve's.
Something like that. We didn't catch that fish because I'm some great guide or anything. That was a lucky fish, and that fish stayed hooked, and that fish was a crazy mutant. But at the same time, it's 7:30 in October, and we're out there doing what we need to do.
And you have a collision of perfect condition.
Yeah,
and
and that
the right spot, the right bait at the right. Listen, that's
if I put the trolling motor down and work it by the trolling motor, you never contact that fish.
F
And
plus L plus P.
By putting that tiller, that 115 Yami, in and out of gear, being able to keep nuts on. Instead of getting 5 casts, you're getting 25 on the spot. Hennepin Island, that was another spot. When it blew, that's why I loved running a big tiller out there. The boat control was, in my mind, a whole lot easier. You get your angle, you get the wind, start popping that thing in and out of gear, you can stay nuts on.
Let's talk about Mille Lacs a little bit. This is obviously, you can tell it's kind of dark in here, so this would almost be considered an after hours edition. It's a combination of after hours and the front porch edition of In-Fisherman Storyline.
Nice.
So we're kind of bringing everything together here. So we're going to hop around a little bit on the timeline. I do want to talk to you about Iowa football. We'll get to that down the road. But
Go Hawks.
that's right. Let's talk a little bit about Mille Lacs. I feel like. And I have no allegiance to fisheries management or whatever, so we can be honest here. But the Mille Lacs musky fishery, I feel, has been tremendously neglected.
Oh, without a doubt.
Because those days, I'm not saying that was the norm, but like you had a shot at that fish, probably exponentially higher opportunity than you do today.
We had people coming to Mille Lacs from all over the world. Sweden and England to catch 50-inch muskies. And
They were no gimme,
crash?
but there was something going on there.
excuse me. No, there wasn't never a gimme, but there was a good population. They were young, what I call young dumb fish generationally. You take some of these lakes in northern Wisconsin; those fish are, 87 generations old. However, whatever, But those fish had been stocked; they were just getting big. But I think the beauty is they got the recipe. They did it on Vermilion. They did it on Mille Lacs. You can do it again.
What happened? What do you think led to the? What was there? Did they quit stocking muskies on Mille Lacs?
There was, I think, a bunch of factors, but that was the biggest one.
I mean, it takes a long time to grow a fish that size.
It does, and that lake's huge. And if people really knew the survival rate of, 12, 14-inch muskies, it's dismal.
I suppose the
It's a
pike
whole
eat
lot
them up
better
too.
than fry or fingerlings.
Right.
But good Lord, it's in the teens.
So what?
Birds, all sorts of predation.
Do you think there was an element of the shock and awe factor of giant
Excuse me.
muskies kind of coming into the picture where people wanted to come and experience that? And was the
Sure.
I don't know that harvest was a factor, but mishandling perhaps, overpressure,
yeah.
you think?
Without a doubt. There were fish that died. Yeah, without a doubt. I know we killed a 48 one night in the waves, and it wasn't crazy windy. This fish did not bleed a drop. Literally cut that double cowgirl out of its throat. I mean, cut the bait into pieces. Not a drop of blood. We could not get that fish upright. That fish would not go.
I'm glad you said that because I think today's generation of social media warriors and people that want to catch a muskie for social media, they're like, "Oh, you killed a muskie, you're a terrible person." Like you don't go out of your way to kill a muskie. You do everything you can to get it put back, but if you fish enough,
You're going to kill him.
you're going to kill one.
Yeah.
It's going to happen.
It's going to happen.
So you got to do everything you can. But the other thing to realize too is, yeah, if everybody that goes musky fishing kills the fish they catch, it's going to have an impact on the fishery.
Without a doubt.
But ultimately, if everybody's aware and doing their best, right, fish may die, but it's not going to affect the impact.
You know, on social media, you see guys that are just starting. One of the questions you always get, you know, what baits should I buy, or rods and reels? You know, and first thing, get a big net. Get a big quality net. Spend the money on good quality release tools. Don't get the $5 pair of bolt cutters because they're on sale. Get the Nipix bolt cutters. You know, buy good quality stuff. Prepare for success. Baits, I could throw 5 baits conceivably all year. Don't tell anybody, but I could. It's not the baits. It's water column. It's all sorts of other things. But
well, we just talked about
these
this.
Tools, huge,
big net, huge,
Yeah.
and a good bag. I mean, there are numbers of imposter nets out there. I'd say that they sell a net for $200 and it's got a piece of crap twine bag on it, and it really wrecks the fish. So you need to spend the money, but you know, musky anglers are notoriously anal.
Oh, yeah.
Sharpening hooks, making sure the reels are in good shape, the line is fresh, good leaders. They check for nicks, and if there is so much as like I think I see a nick, they're cutting the leader off, throwing the bottom of the boat. So why do people get this anal retentive about it? The answer is very simple, because if you encounter a fish like the one you just talked about, you do not want to think about your reel failing, your line breaking, your leader coming apart, the net knocking the fish off, or getting hooked. There are controllable factors that you got to be in charge of. And when you're musky fishing, you can't leave it to chance.
Well, and even where they're plentiful, they're not.
Right.
You know, and the example I give, when they're going, they'll hit a 2x4 if it's presented right. But how often are they going? Not very.
No.
That's where the trigger comes in. That's a whole nother topic.
But if you can control the controllables, you know, identify the factors that you can be in charge of, that's going to increase your chance of success when the encounter comes. That's the thing, right?
For sure.
You know, if you cast a bait off and your line breaks and there's no fish on there, like, you're out $30, but at least you didn't lose the fish of a lifetime. Whereas if you can prepare and sharp hooks and all that stuff. So when you see musky anglers on TV, or if you're kind of watching these videos and you see a guy pick his bait up and he's checking the hook point on 3 different trebles, and he's making sure that the eye at the top of the bait, if it's like a suic or something like that, is tight. You know, there are things that can come apart for you when you have a 50-pound, 40-pound, even 30-pound fish on the other end, and you want that fish in there.
You know, I had a fish last year jump. This was in northern Wisconsin. And it was probably a mid-40s, 45, 46. But that fish jumped 10 feet from the boat, had an 8-aught, and this was on a Red October tube, and I was fishing a shallow rig, and I was working it slower over some deeper weeds, sandgrass, whatnot. Anyway, this fish jumps. It's got this 8-aught in its face, literally throwing its head. I mean, it's way out of the water. Throwing its head back and forth, throws the bait. I get that bait in, straightened out the hook on the 8-aught. It's not like I had crazy pressure on that fish. No, it used the weight of the bait, and it was throwing its head so hard and so fast that it straightened that hook just enough to get an angle, and away it went. And that bait was totally destroyed. Destroyed the rig, destroyed the tube, destroyed everything. But it was cool, man.
Well,
I'll remember that one for a long time.
We walk away from these get-togethers, these outings, with some great stories, and I think that's really what makes the mystique of musky fishing so attractive, is you encounter some of the most incredible fish. And I mean, especially in the part of the country where we live, the upper Midwest, where when you encounter a big fish, you can't wait to tell the story.
Oh, that fish, that was on a Saturday in northern Wisconsin on a 625-acre lake that had 87 jet boats running around, water skiers, as many pleasure boats as you could see. And here's this freaking muskie eating that tube and jumping up right through the middle of it all.
Yeah, I got a story for you on that exact line. So west of here, west central Minnesota, I was fishing with a buddy, and we had this jack leg come out in his wake boat and was literally doing circles around us. I don't think it was it was antagonistic. It was far enough away where you're like, good grief. But he would come.
Right.
He started getting closer and closer and closer. And this is a true story. The guy gets a little close, and I'm like, uttering
Right.
foul language under my breath. And finally, I see him coming, and I'm like, watching. I bombed this bucktail out there, and it landed in, like, I'm telling, 2 feet from the back of the boat. Wow. So I was a little close. I made 3 cranks.
Got a fish.
I caught a fish. And I'm like,
oh, that's great.
So here's a little bit of humble pie for Thomas. Like I took a step back, and it's impacted me since. Like that moment, it was a 38. You know, it was a fat, short fish. You know, pretty, whatever. But it taught me something. Like, you know, you can get pissed about this stuff, but these fish are used to boats running over their heads. There's not a fish alive in Minnesota that hasn't.
Back in the day, we were catching, you know, muskies on Minnetonka. You know, 24, 28-foot cruiser goes by. Throw your low rider in the prop wash. Start cranking. That fish comes out of the prop wash and eats a low rider.
Yeah, you know, I think that's an indication of perhaps the frustration. They're opportunistic. They're not smart. They're stupid, but they're also not stupid. There's
poop spawn.
They do. That's 100% right. And there's points there. A guy I'm going to have on the show before too long, Don Persh, is a legendary musky guy. Had a lot to do with In-Fisherman in the early days.
Stayed at his place back in '89.
Dude, I want to go there.
Canadian adventure.
You know, Don is being inducted into the Minnesota Fishing Hall of Fame this year.
Oh, absolutely should be.
I will be there.
Awesome.
And I'm going to go see him. Don, if you're ever able to listen to this, we're going to get together. Anyway, so he told me a story about Rowan Lake when he had, you know, those were pretty unpressured muskies, just dumb, willing to show up, and you know they weren't you know eating at every cast. But he said I had a big follow on a bucktail and large fish, and it swung off. It's like they do. I'm done with this, and it swam under the boat, and he decided to walk over there to see what was going on. That fish had turned around and was staring at the prop of his boat, and a second muskie had come up behind the first one. And they're in line, 2 giant muskies staring at the stainless prop.
You know, I've had 2 fish actually hit
the prop,
the trolling motor prop. One in Wisconsin. No, they were actually both in Wisconsin. Missouri, fishing Hazel Creek back in the day.
Heard of that place?
Was fishing with my ex-brother-in-law. He had a bass boat at the time. I'm in the back of the boat, and it's trolling motor only lake, and he's got the motor trimmed up. And I turned my head. There's a fish following the stainless prop, which is partially in, partially out of the water. I'm throwing an M&G spinnerbait. I pitch it back there. Fish comes right on it. Go into the figure eight. Fish tries to eat it. Head shake, gone. I'm like, ugh. I'm standing there all dejected. I turn my head. That stupid fish is right on the prop again. Instant replay. But this time it stuck. It was a 45-inch fish.
It ate the second time around.
Ate the second time and actually got stuck.
What the hell? You just can't write that stuff.
No.
And I think that's the nature of the sport is once in a while you get these gimmies. It's like you can't do anything wrong.
Right.
But then there are the times you just can't do anything right.
I
got a question for you. The biggest fish you've ever seen, but I'm going to start with my story. The biggest encounter. So I was fishing a lake west of here, and I was with a buddy from Iowa, and he's not a musky fisherman. He hates needles, hates sharp teeth, so he didn't want to do it. But he went with me anyways. Long story. And we were fishing in a very public, accessible area that's known to have muskies that live in this weed bed. And I dropped this. It was a Manta Hang 10.
Okay.
And a fire tiger. And so that's a glide bait. So when it kind of is neutrally buoyant, it's below the surface, and it does these long darting. You got to really work the rod. I made 2 or 3 twitches. You remember those things? You can bomb those things a mile.
Oh, without a doubt.
2 or 3 twitches. I see the shadow up behind it. I'm like, God, Jeremy, here's a fish. So twitch, 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 and this fish is turning her body after this bait.
All those? I used to call the manta the Stevie Wonder baby. People's like, why is that? Because the fish is underneath looking at that thing going side to side.
Side to
Stevie
side.
Wonder.
Yeah, well, funny thing is, this fish followed that bait into the boat. And Steve, I can't think of a fish I've seen this bigger.
Wow.
55, probably.
Big.
But the worst part, the best part, you never forget the train wrecks, right? You always remember those. That fish, it's like it gave me the opportunity to see its entire body. I'm one twitch from the figure eight, and it's like, I'm done with this crap. And it just turned sideways.
Flipped you the fin.
Flipped me the fin. And I'm like, I cannot believe how long. Like, it looked like it was half as long as the boat.
Right.
And to this day, I've never seen one bigger.
You know, I've seen some really long fish. Longest in the boat was a 56.5 out of Mille Lacs. That was Charlie Carpenter. But I tell you that without a doubt, the biggest fish I've ever seen, and I didn't see it at boat side. We were fishing this was 04, 05, fishing a musky first outing up at Wabagoon. And a buddy's throwing a rad dog. He gets like a 32, 34-inch pike, a nice pike. And he gets it boat side, and he like brained the thing. What we call he brained it. One of those single hooks straight up the roof of the mouth. Dang.
Yep, killed it dead.
So he unhooks it, lets it go. Well, that fish is on the surface twitching, and we're working around this island, and I'm in the back of the boat, and I turn my head, and I see these jaws come up out of the water, take that pike, and go down, and that fish only came out of the water a portion. But that fish was 1.5 feet deep. Those jaws looked like a frickin' pterodactyl. Biggest fish I've ever seen, without a doubt.
Take a stab when you're dreaming about this fish.
Oh, 60 plus for sure.
You think?
Oh, without a doubt. Without a doubt. I mean, I've seen 55s, 56s in, my brother used to say too, he's like, a 52 is only 2 inches bigger than a 50. I'm like, no, man. A 52 is 2 inches bigger than a 50 everywhere.
Everywhere.
Not just length.
Dude, that is the greatest example of how a muskie grows once they hit that point.
Right. And that's why this fish, I could still see that in my mind, and it was maybe 20 yards away, but I can see that in my mind perfectly. And how far away it was and how big it was at that distance, unbelievable.
60.
Oh, yeah. And you see, these fish, when they throw their heads, even 40, 45s, when they start opening their mouth and throwing it back and forth, it's big. It's still big. This thing, when it took that pike, whole nother class. Yeah. Yeah, that one keeps me.
Say this again. This is the part we're going to run this on social media because this is such a great example of how fish get bigger. Explain the 2 inches.
Well, a lot of people think that, a 52-inch muskie, that's only 2 inches bigger than a 50. But it's 2 inches everywhere, 2 inches around, 2 inches at the head, 2 inches at the tail root. Mm-hmm. Talking about Jody Dom's fish, that beast.
It had everything.
You couldn't get both hands at around the tail root. The tail root was that fat. Well, and another thing about his fish, we won't get into strains. That was a Wisconsin strain fish.
Was it really?
It was.
They stocked those in Mille Lacs back in the day?
They did back in 72.
Okay.
And that was it Caleb's Fish Farm or something out of Bouderay?
How old was that fish, do you think?
Oh, God. That fish was at least 25 years old.
Think about that. And I don't think that's out of the norm today even. I feel like there's probably numbers of fish in Minnesota waters that are in excess of 25 years old.
Well, and we, back on Mille Lacs, we used to talk, there was the Leech Lake strain, and then the Wisconsin strain we called the brownfish, because they were noticeably different, And I had a client, the guy that got the 56.5, Charlie Carpenter, he caught one the following year, was probably 38, 39. And it was brown as brown can be. And I'm like, so are those scotty fish? Are they spawning in here? Gotta be. That fish had exact same markings as Jody Dom's fish.
Do you feel like either of the subspecies carries weight better than the other?
Oh, the scotty fish do. Yeah. Leech Lake fish always get longer, and they can get a big belly.
And they're beautiful, too.
Oh, yeah.
Spots.
Like Jason Hammernick, he had a client had a 5229 out there. That thing was a mutant, and that was a leech fish. But typically, those leech fish had just big bellies.
Do you suffer from UWL, unexpected wader leakage? Don't worry, LL Bean has the solution to keep you on the water or in the water all day long thanks to their double L waders that feature super seam, a roomy leg design for freedom of movement, and plenty of chest pocket storage. Keep your cell phone out of the water, and everything else is valuable, and you can learn more at llbean.com. There's something... When I explain to family members or friends that I love to musky fish, they're like, "Oh yeah, that sounds good." Show them some pictures. That's incredible.
Whoa, they're big.
I don't feel like you can adequately convey how much heartbreak comes along with this sport. And it's not that you suck. It's not that you're doing things wrong necessarily.
You just put so much into it.
You have to put so much time and money and effort, and maybe not as much of the money. That you do have to spend money correctly, but the investment to catch a fish. I remember, you'll probably remember back in the days of Iowa when I was still living there, when we were fighting with the DNR to get musky stockings increased, and they were like, well, we want to see somewhere in the neighborhood of about 100 to 180 hours of fishing per fish. And I'm like, do what? No,
insane.
That's insane. Well,
you want to turn everybody into golfers? What are you doing?
There's a chance I'm forgetting the actual number. I feel like that's a bit extreme, but it was absurd. Like, okay, well, if you go put in a week's worth of fishing, I bet it was more like 30 hours of fish.
Well, and I always joke with people too. You hear the fish of 10,000 casts. Mm-hmm. I'm like, man, if it takes me 10,000 casts to catch a fish, I'm going to start golfing.
Well, but you have to invest in the biology, understand the fishery, the In-Fisherman formula, right? You have to put yourself in position. But as you're learning that process, you will put in 10,000 casts for a fish.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
You got to embrace the suck, as they say.
Embrace the suck. Embrace the grind.
Oh, I'm interested in your evolution. I mean, the thing that fascinates me, Steve, is you were kind of on the leading edge of the musky craze of the modern era. Like, you were committed to the sport as a younger guy, started guiding, worked in the industry to an extent. You've got a great story, but one of the things I've noticed, and I'm curious how you've stayed the course. I can't think of many musky guides that are your age that haven't quit or sold their musky gear and moved to Florida. There's numbers of these guys that are renowned musky anglers that said, you know what, I'm done with the muskies, I'm going to Florida. What keeps you involved?
It's the opportunity to teach and to give back. That's what I have. I don't have, when I did the soul searching, back in 2020, and I'm like, what am I going to do? How can I give back? But at the same time, don't get me wrong, take care of my head and my heart too. There's a lot of times I thought I was born to be on the bow of a boat, born to be on a boat, and these fish, they're so, dealing with Mother Nature, it's just so different every time, season to season, week to week, you're on a pattern. The pattern is 2 days, and then, something weather pattern comes in and it changes, and it's a never ending. You got to think. You got to be engaged, and that's, I think, what keeps me engaged.
Seems like the puzzle never gets solved.
No, it doesn't. And as much as you learn and you think you got it down, you're dealing with Mother Nature.
And you don't know what's coming in the next cast.
No, she's got a way.
Yeah, and she's going to win almost every time.
That is the beauty of fishing in itself. Every cast is an occasion for hope. Mm-hmm. Every cast.
Every cast is an occasion for a life changer too.
Right.
We spent a week together this year at Andy Meyer's Lodge, a place I've longed to go, and we're going to go back. We're going to make that happen soon. And it was a week full of frustration. Did we accomplish our goal? We did. We got a cool segment. If you haven't seen it yet, it's going to be coming out very soon. But we had some frustrating times there, and it's like sometimes when you put your prerogative, I don't know if this is just nature in general, where when you get your priorities out of whack, Mother Nature has a way of setting you straight,
Amen.
doesn't it?
She does.
And that trip, I think, is going to go down in my history as a very memorable trip, but one that is full of like, God, what if? You know, let's tell some of these encounters. How many fish did we lose?
We lost 3 in a row.
In a row.
Bing, bing, bing.
Yep.
You know, and each time, well, the first time it's like, oh, and the second time it's like, oh, WTF. And the third time,
we breaking out the bourbon in the boat and sit down.
Third time it's like, come on, man, what's going on here? But we got it figured out, and I know what it was too.
What'd you figure?
It wasn't, what we thought it was. It was a combination. It was the perfect storm. Fishing suckers like that, the rod cannot be too stiff. It's got to be soft.
You're probably right about that.
To absorb some of that. Mm-hmm. So it was just a combination of things.
But see, the Monday morning quarterback component to that is
we talked a lot about.
Oh dear, yeah, we said a lot of bad words. Right. But if you're not willing to like look at what went wrong and try to learn from it, I think that's the part of a dedicated angler you have to have built in. You got to want to learn.
And that's why I was thinking about it through this winter, and the more I thought about it, those sticks we were using were like the extra heavies,
9 foot plus, yeah,
right, because we had to get a good hook set. But at the same time, it didn't protect the line, you know.
Well, and there's an impact component, especially if you got if you get a real big fish to eat in the figure 8 at your feet when it's moving 35 miles an hour, and that's another opportunity for a fish to come off. But you do need to have a little bit of impact cushion, even when you're casting. So I think that while we focus a lot on the right equipment and maintaining that equipment, there's also an element of sometimes you can go too far with too big a gear. And I think this is a fine example of that.
Dude, we could talk about rods too.
Let's do it.
So many rods are too stiff. The actions are too fast. And we, like bass, walleye anglers, we're technique specific. But we need a rod that can cast and work the bait, some of which weigh a pound or more. Set the hook, which that's another thing. You get a big fish eating a big rubber bait, chomping down on that. You think you're setting the hook? No, you're not setting the hook. You're not moving that bait.
You hanging on.
You hanging on, and you reel like your life depends on it, and keep a parabolic bend in that rod, and that fish will stay hooked. Will get hooked and stay hooked.
And a big extra stiff rod sometimes isn't going to maintain that pressure. Now, there's a time.
Creates a slack line a lot, too, because of the fast action of the rod.
And the reel. If you're not keeping up on the reel, it's easy for that fish to swim towards you and you can't keep up. But there are circumstances where perhaps that action is going to be the difference maker in your day. And here's an example. I went to St. Clair, fished with Spencer Berman, and that's a long bomb, rip and rubber type presentation. You need to have the longest, heaviest rod you can because you're ripping that thing a length of the rod. So a lot of times that bait's shooting through the water
6 feet
or more.
7 feet.
Yeah.
Right.
So you need to be able to catch up to it. And those fish, 9 out of 10 times, are going to eat on the paws.
Right.
And so when that fish swings up to grab that bait as it's falling, you need to be setting the hook. You're essentially setting the hook the whole retrieve.
The whole retrieve.
So there is an opportunity.
If a fish eats it, it's
hooked up.
Right.
And again, when you're talking about inadequate gear, when it comes to muskies, it's going to expose your weaknesses very quickly. And that was an opportunity for us to learn. The next time I go sucker fishing, we're going to rig differently to make sure that we're not breaking off fish or we're losing fish. You need to have a combination of all of the right factors.
And I see too, bait selection. A lot of guys overwork baits, or the gear that they're using, it overpowers the bait. Mm-hmm. Classic example: 6-inch Phantom or Chaos 8-inch Naven. You're just twitching that thing. You're working that thing. You're not jerking it. You're not ripping it. I'm honestly, my favorite Phantom rod, small glider rod. It's a Thorne Brothers heavy 711 bass rod with a moderate heavy action.
You know who believes in bass rods? Doug Stange.
And I'm telling you, I put a 300 Tranks on that thing. I got 100-pound fins, 40G braid, which is 12-pound diameter. So I can make a bomb cast and still have my full gear ratio. I'm not halfway down into the spool. And I mean, literally, I'm working that bait with the flick of my wrist. You know,
And
like
you're
a
able to do that all day.
And I'm able to do that all day. And certain times of the year, we're throwing baits like that a good chunk of the day.
You know, I've fished with some guides that they want the absolute toughest, you know, rod action and 120-pound test and 130-pound leaders. And I think that might, especially in a guide scenario, that might eliminate some mishaps with inexperienced anglers.
Yeah.
But as far as, like, you know, the discussion of musky baits and rods being broom handles, and there was a time when that was accurate, but the technique specific mentality has made its way into musky fishing, and I think it's a fascinating advancement in the sport where, you know, there are techniques that you need to have different rods for in musky fishing, and one of the things that I've become a big fan of is the extended length that you have. You know, a 9-foot to 10-foot rod. I mean, you're older than me, but I'm catching up to the age level where I don't want to bend over and figure eight with an 8-foot rod anymore. That 2 extra feet is tremendous.
Well, and I mean, most of the rods I'm throwing now are 10-footers. But like I was talking about this glider rod or a jerkbait rod, that's maybe not applicable in Minnesota. That technique, you're not using that, you know, smaller baits, whatnot.
But you got to be a student of that game to recognize that the fish you're pursuing in Iowa, you're not going to catch a 50-pounder.
Right,
likely.
exactly.
So,
and that's kind of the point I was making on that. But, you know, longer rods, what a difference maker. I remember the first long, and it was a race for rods. Every couple of years I'm getting a longer rod. But in 01, All-Star was making a 9-foot inshore that was an absolute beautiful musky rod. And that was, I mean, you could throw bucktails, topwaters. I mean, it was a pretty versatile rod. But that was a 9-footer back in 01. Yeah.
And I mean, even from then on, like I don't think the road to the 10-foot rods happened overnight. I kind of feel like it kind of stayed in that 8-foot. You remember the St. Croix Triumph that was triple X heavy that could pick up a 5-gallon bucket of water?
Right.
What are you going to do with that thing?
Right.
I have one in my garage.
Pole
still.
vault.
Right. But you know, that was the advancement of the time. And I mean, you know, you kind of look back at how fishing has evolved, and there was a time where we look back and kind of chuckle now, but that was the thing to have then.
Oh yeah.
You know?
I remember when there was an article that came out in In-Fisherman. Doug Stange talked to a couple guys from the Twin Cities by the name of Paul and Greg Thorne. Had a shop called Thorne Brothers, and they made custom rods. And I want to say this was 82, 83, early 80s, because I got to Iowa in 86, which that's another story. Yeah, when I got my first credit card.
Ruh-roh.
You mean I can call there and they'll deliver it to my house? I just got to give them this number? Sure.
I'm in.
Right. But, yeah, after that article, Dad ordered a couple Sage rods from Thorns, and the rod length just kept growing. You know, I remember my first bait cast rod. My dad bought a red 5000 and an old Head and Pal offset handle from a guy down the alley. And that was my first real musky rod.
How long was that rod?
5.5.
Modified broomstick.
You bet. Yeah.
So let's transition into some modern day musky talk here. We've established that there are some great stories, some encounters that have made us who we are. Our passion for muskies stemmed from encounters with mystic giant fish.
Right.
We'll never forget the rest of our life, but things are a little different nowadays. The fish are still the same fish. And I think that how anglers go about catching them it's crossed a threshold that sparks some debate. And while
Mildly.
to put it mildly, and on this show we have talked probably ad nauseum about forward-facing sonar and the impact on fishing. And I think a lot of the This is where you're probably going to label me a hypocrite, and that's fine. I haven't made up my mind. But if there is an element of fishing that might warrant a deeper dive, some more studies, some more data on how the fishery is impacted, and I'm talking the musky fishery, how it's impacted by forward-facing sonar, I think there's some viable discussions going on. I'm not going to sit here and say, ban it, get rid of it, it's wrong. Barbless hooks, water releases, I don't think that's the answer. But what I do want to hear from you on is your experience in the musky community, what's going on, and are we headed down a road that we need to maybe take a closer look at?
Well, I think we definitely need to take a closer look at it. I have experience with forward-facing sonar. How I've used it, suckers up on Eagle Lake, watching a sucker, trolling, setting trolling depths, with baits. What the controversy, I guess, within the musky industry has really come from what's called sharpshooting. And basically what sharpshooting is, it entails multiple transducers, multiple screens, transducer each side of the boat, whatever. And literally guys drive around basins at certain times of the year when these fish are just more vulnerable, and see a fish on the screen, start casting at it.
And those fish generally eat with reckless abandon.
Right. And when you think about, open water type fish, their strike zone's huge. There's nothing to deaden the vibration, anything. Sight lines typically clear water,
I know that this is a joke I've often made. I don't necessarily associate with special interest groups. I'm not a member of Pheasants Forever. I'm not a member of Muskies Inc. necessarily. And I do think that Muskies Inc. is a good thing. And honestly, it's probably a good thing to be a member of, but you can't be a member of everything. And I don't spend my money that way at this point. I'm open to criticism on that. However, I do think that we've gotten to a point in musky fishing where, if we're going to add restrictions to the way that we catch fish, then maybe we ought to not even fish for them at all. Maybe we shut the season down indefinitely and just leave them out there to do their open water thing, being a little facetious. But there comes a point here where if I don't get behind, but I can understand the restriction that's occurring in the professional bass scene. I can understand it. I can understand the restriction that's occurred in the PMTT that was outlawed. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I understand that was a situation. And I don't disagree with some of the mentalities on both sides of the discussion. There's a lot of discussions to be had. But what I guess I have a problem with is any type of guide or professional angler telling me as a weekend angler how I can or can't use technology or certain techniques to catch fish within the reason of personal responsibility.
A guide or anybody, even if I don't like it or I don't agree with it, I'm not one. Who am I to tell you that you shouldn't use it? You should. Granted, I'm hearing things that it's detrimental to open water fisheries. There's barotrauma. There's some of these things going on that ultimately will hurt a fishery. We need to get more data, more empirical data, more actual information. If you're seeing floaters, you got to report the floaters, take pictures, whatever we got to do. But the whole, banning things and we hurt these fish. We use big 7-8 out hooks. We're sticking them in their face. Mm-hmm. Guess what? Sometimes that 10-inch suic or that whatever, that hook comes back and gets them right in the eye, or goofy things.
It's a blood sport. Let's be honest.
It is. Really.
And catch and release has proven to work, especially on muskies.
It's a renewable resource.
It is.
For sure.
I have a good friend that's caught the same fish out of a nearby lake here 3 times over a 5-year period. So it absolutely works. And I think that if there's discussions to be had, and this is where it's hard to enforce. It's All right, we don't know yet the impacts of barotrauma on muskies. There seems to be an impact, we think. Now, we could also go down the road of, if you want to talk evidence provable in a court, do we know that fish didn't die from a deep hook? Did it age out? Was it handled poorly? What was the reason that made that fish die? We don't know that answer. But is it right, if we do believe, and if there is some growing database, which I think we're learning now, if there's a study that's going to indicate the barotrauma effects on deep water muskies, can you create a law? Is it enforceable to say, hey, you can go muskie fishing between this date and that date,
right,
but during this time of year, we don't know when that's going to be. You can't target them in deep water.
Right.
It sounds good on paper, but it's almost impossible.
Realistic.
Right.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I mean, I don't know the answer. One of the things I've said on here a bunch is if somebody can master the technology and then take a step back and say, I've got a problem with it, that's a person I want to hear from. I want to hear what that person has to say with some on-the-water, real-world experience.
Right.
I'm willing to hear that. I may not agree, but that's an argument I have, as opposed to the guys that get butthurt because their buddy catches way more fish than them and they've got the sonar and they're mad about it.
Well, and here's, that is the other piece. I mean, guys like myself, we're the old school guys who've been doing it a long time, a lot of trial and error, and then you see young guys that have been fishing for 3 years now are guiding and are catching 42 50s a year because they can play the video game, that they've grown up with technology. They're good at it. What do you say?
I don't know.
I don't like it,
right,
but what can I say? It's not my gig.
I think we talked about this on the way over here. I think probably the most important part of that is the awareness side of it.
Yeah.
One of the arguments that I heard on Steve Vernella's Meat Eater podcast, they had Larry Ramsell on, and he is a staunch opponent of forward-facing sonar, and I can understand why. I would love to have a discussion with him, and we're having now, and let's talk about some alternative possible reasons. But his number one concern with it, and I don't think I disagree with this, Steve, it's that you're putting inexperienced anglers in the presence of trophy class fish more often than they're prepared for.
That's a great point. And when I was on Mille Lacs, I had a lot of guys from Wisconsin, people that from Chicago area vacationing in Wisconsin. I said, these aren't 40-inch fish. I mean, when you get your hand in there and you slide up in that gill cover and put your thumb in there, you better make a fist and really hold on, with your whole arm, because that fish will flop and it'll break your wrist.
And it's 2 inches bigger everywhere, including the back straps.
Exactly.
I think there's an element of truth there. But again, that's a component that I don't think you can police. I don't think you can manage that. But I think that if here's an example of ice fishing right now. The crappies are suspended and they're cruising the basins, and they're often in 30, 40 feet of water. And a crappie is of the most susceptible to barotrauma effects. So if you're going to go out and ice fish right now, and you're like, I don't need to keep any fish, I'm just going to catch and release, which you legally have the right to do right now. Crappies is open year round in Minnesota, and ice fishing, once walleye, pike, bass, etc., closes here in the winter, which is a week and a half ago, you aren't allowed to pursue those species. So what are you going to do? You're going to go pan fishing, crappie fishing. Well, if you pull a crappie out of 30 feet of water,
night, Irene,
it's dead. Now there's some controversy there too. We don't know for a fact 100% if all those fish perish, but I have personally seen limits upon limits. They're dead in the bottom of the hole. You can't get them to go down. So there is some truth there. So should the DNR step in and say, hey, we have discovered that crappies are susceptible to barotrauma in the late ice period, we're going to make them off limits for 2 months.
Do we have to make laws, or can we put the responsibility, the onus on the sportsman?
What do you think?
Therein lies the challenge.
That is a challenge.
It is.
I would like to say anglers are responsible enough to know the difference, but I think a lot of them don't particularly care. Some of them don't care, some do.
Right.
The future of the resource that we love, whether it's crappies to muskies, cannot be 100% managed by regulation alone.
I think the common denominator, or the bottom line, is education. We just have to educate and talk to people. And if you can make somebody, even if you don't know, I'm not a fisheries biologist, and I don't play one on TV. But if we can get people to think, at least, I mean, down in Iowa, especially on the Facebook pages, if you put a post on muskie, I mean, being positive in, an educational perspective, the trolls will come out of the woodwork.
Oh, yes, they will. That's right. Yep. They're good for
they
that.
They do, and, and the whole point gets lost, and, I mean, the other day, this was a classic. Guy posts a picture on the Palo page. It's musky season, and it's a video or a picture. It was a video of a muskie with a big stick through it over a fire.
You know how many times that got sent to me?
Yeah, dude.
I got that. 4 or 5 of my buddies sent that to me.
So, and then, the guys start going on it, and I'm like, this guy trolls more than I do.
Well, so here's a true story. There are lakes in Wisconsin. There are numbers of lakes, and they're small, that need muskie harvest.
Yeah, they got a lot of 28 inchers in them.
Mm-hmm. And there's no pike. There's probably few bass, a lot of perch. There's a sustainable forage base, but that's one of those rare situations where selective harvest might benefit a muskie population.
But I tell you, there's some serious issues going on over in Wisconsin too. We were just talking about forward-facing sonar. Some of the lakes over there that are getting pummeled with it. Mm-hmm. If you combine that and, like you said, newer people that aren't as experienced. And then you combine that with the Native American spearing that goes on, it decimates a lake.
It does, and that's
62 fish from a 100-acre lake in one winter.
Lot of fish.
There ain't many fish left.
Do you remember? We'll take a step back. You remember the Brushy Creek project?
Oh, bringing the fish up.
Yeah,
I wasn't part of that, but I remember that.
That was a thing that, and Chris Carlson is a mutual friend of ours. We spent some time in the boat together. Chris was a part of this, and there was 1 or 2 muskie clubs. We got to tell the story. This is a funny story, and it's interesting. So Iowa largely flies under the radar for muskie fishing, but if you want to find some interesting and unique experiences, Iowa's got some really cool stuff going on.
For sure.
And it's better than it used to be. So this is, good grief, Steve. It was my Iowa Sportsman magazine days. So this is pre-freelance, pre-North American Fisherman. I was a poor...
Wow, that's 20 years ago?
Yeah. I mean, it's pushing that. 2006, 7.
Okay.
So almost 20. So Brushy Creek was right down the road from where I lived, and I discovered there were muskies in there. I met Tracy Crail.
At Brushy.
Nice. It's another story. We'll have to do a podcast with Tracy sometime.
For sure.
Think of the world of that guy. So
he's retiring this year.
Is he?
We are going to fish together.
Oh, my gosh. We should all go fishing together.
Absolutely.
You guys need to come up together. We've tried to film with Tracy a couple times at this lake. It's a timber-filled, it's a reservoir, and there's a lot of standing timber. It's not your quintessential musky destination, but it's a super cool experience. We'll get to that. We're going to have Tracy on one of these days. Hey, Tracy, we're both saying hi.
What up, man?
So I'm getting involved in the muskie community, and I was frustrated by the amount of time I was putting in on that lake, fishing what I thought were good spots. And there's probably an element of my inexperience. It was relatively early for me. I think I was in the first 8-9 years of my muskie fishing. So I didn't know everything.
Too late to turn back.
Yep, I was hooked, literally. And I think I'd caught a few out of there. Well, somehow me and a buddy discovered that there was a bunch of people fishing on the sides of the spillway below the dam of Brushy Creek Lake. And I saw one of these dudes, I'm fishing up on the top side, and I see this guy bring this muskie up over the side of the wall, whacks it on the head, throws it in the mud, and he puts it in his minivan and goes home. I'm like, there are muskies down there. That's a sad thing, but there are muskies down there. So I went down there with a buddy, waiting, and we caught like 7 muskies in 45 minutes. It was stupid.
Wow.
And it was, I think we fished for 2 hours that day. We caught 7 right away, and then I think we ended the day with one other one that was a little guy. I'm like, I wonder how many fish are down in here.
Down in there.
We let them go. Came back a few times. I actually did some bow fishing for carp off those walls, and you see those muskies come up and go down and porpoise and do what they do. I'm like, there's a lot of fish down here. Well, contacted Chris and a handful of the other guys that I knew. I'm forgetting a lot of names, and if you're listening to this, guys, I apologize. I can't get my kids' names straight. But we got together.
And I used to tackle with my head, so I forget things.
That's true. So we got a group of guys together, did get the DNR's blessing, because in the state of Iowa, you can't move a fish from one fishery to the next. And the dam actually creates a separation between bodies of water.
Fisheries, right.
So what we did is we got a group of guys together, and
this was great.
We I think 8 or 10 of us, in a matter of 5 or 6 days, and this not consecutive days, but probably a couple weekends, maybe a month or two worth of time investment, moved, I believe, 65 to 70 muskies from below the spillway back up into the lake on Brushy Creek. And I don't know that it worked, but we raised some awareness. I wrote a story.
There's a barrier now.
There's a barrier now. And so I'm going to tell you how that happened. But our transfer process is what was interesting. So we'd catch the fish, got a 5-gallon bucket. I think the biggest fish we moved was 46. Like, there wasn't any behemoth. So 5-gallon bucket full of water. You get a buddy. Fish goes in the water. You wrap its body in a towel, and you hold the fish's tail up just enough so that fish's head's not kinked down in the bottom of the bucket, right? They all swam off, Steve. Every single one of them swam off.
Ran them up the hill.
And that hill, by the way, was terrible.
I was going to say, where are all the kids?
Oh, good grief.
What the kids doing?
Okay, so now let's talk a little bit about numbers. I don't remember, excuse me, the exact stocking ratio, but we figured on, I think Brushy, I think it's 1,200 or 1,600 acres. I don't know. Somebody can fact check me on that, but it's not a giant lake. It's less than 2,000 acres.
Oh, yeah.
And if they're trying to stock one fish per acre, and you can assume some level of mortality in stocking, where perhaps, let's say you're stocking 2,000 fingerlings and 30% of those are surviving, which is probably reasonable, but maybe overbearing.
10%. Fingerlings, 10%.
You do the math, there's a fair chance that 90% of the fish that were living in that lake were below on the spillway.
Oh, yeah, they're gone.
Now, they were staged down there, so we kind of discovered this scenario. I wrote a story in the Iowa Sportsman magazine, and I got a phone call from a buddy up at the that worked with a guy at the fisheries facility at Spirit Lake. He's like, I hope you got your affairs in order. I think the DNR is going to sue you. I'm like, sue me for what?
Gonna sue you?
Like, bring it on. They're a public-funded entity, right? Well, because it was a gross negligence of the DNR's musky fishing management, period.
Oh, to allow those fish going over.
To stock a trophy fishery.
Right, and then let them disappear.
It's like, what are you guys doing?
You start burning $100 bills?
Oh, yeah. It was a ridiculous scenario. So anyway, long story short.
They're going to sue you.
They never did, obviously. They wouldn't have got much.
Right.
Like a 14-foot
Get your affairs in order.
Yeah, you want my duck boat?
To assassinate me or what?
So anyways, I wrote in the story that the DNR needs to experiment with some barricades. It went in on Big Creek, went in at Brushy, and I think it might have been 3 Mile before they killed it, but there was another lake in western Iowa that had some muskies in it where they worked on the barricade, and guess what? It's working.
Keeping the fish in there.
Brushy Creek, I mean, you're not going to catch, a bunch of fish, but they're in there.
They put a barrier up on McBride, too. Although the smaller fish, I think, can still get through. Mm-hmm. Buddy got a 44.5 fishing Coralville for crappies last spring.
That's the question I have. So these fish that have gone over, where do they end up?
They have caught them below Burlington Street in Iowa City.
No kidding.
Below the railroad trestle in Iowa City.
Is that the
down
Cedar
by
River?
Dairy Queen. That's the Iowa River.
Iowa River.
I mean, they came down through the Coralville Reservoir, shot through the dam, down the river to Iowa City. I mean, and at first I'm hearing these stories. I'm like, okay, BS. It's pike, Well, then I saw the pictures, and they were legitimate 35, 38-inch muskies. What had happened? They got out of McBride with the big floods. Yeah. And that's why we call some of those fish in there, we're fishing for the remnant fish.
The ghost.
The ghost fish. You got it.
God.
because they're really, really big.
Well, think about that for a minute.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so where can that fish go from there? I mean, it's the Mississippi River is the next
Mississippi
stop?
River, yeah.
What could be in the Mississippi River that we don't know about? I mean, they're here.
Oh, jeez.
Who knows?
Scary.
Isn't that? I mean, that's kind of fun to fantasize about, but
Oh.
I think that
Of any species, think about that. What could be in that river?
I've heard there's a flathead catfish the size of Volkswagen. Yeah, that's a great Iowa
Every
story.
dam's got that.
I know. I think that's unique to Iowa, though. But
Right.
I think that even with the element of awareness and bringing people to the table to discuss things, that's what I would like to see happen. That's what I would. I'm a proponent of conversations.
Well, and we're talking about doing that in Iowa. There's been talk this recently about a musky stamp. We've got a statewide 40-inch limit right now, which is absolutely, positively 110% unacceptable.
Absurd.
Don't make it 50 or 54. Give us at least 45, 48. They talk, the stocking program is based on creating a trophy fishery. A 40-inch muskie
Is not a trophy.
is not a trophy anywhere they swim.
You know what they said?
Is it a trophy to somebody who's never caught one? Or
Yep.
Absolutely. It's a nice, beautiful fish.
But I think that's a better opportunity to train that angler about conservation.
Well, and you don't catch 45s unless you release 40s. You don't catch 50s unless you release 48s. And that's been one of my beefs about getting 50s in Iowa. And there's some. I know one guy, he's been catching them on the Iowa Great Lakes using forward-facing sonar. Well, try to do it, fish in these reservoirs, not the natural lakes, fish in these reservoirs. Why aren't we getting 50s? We're getting 48s, 49s. Why aren't we getting? Well, the water's too warm. No, it's not. They're getting 50s in Kentucky. They're getting 50s in West Virginia, Ohio, shad lakes. You think it might have something to do with the size limit? We have to. That's imperative. That's first and foremost.
I've held the opinion for a long time that maybe Iowa isn't capable of growing numbers of 50s. Do you think that's incorrect? Do you think it's possible?
Oh, absolutely possible. Guy I know got a 49 and a quarter down in one of the southern lakes last year. The 50s out of the Bogies and Spirits and that.
Well, those lakes, especially the Iowa Great Lakes, I would
and clear,
Yeah.
kind of throw those out.
Right.
But the reservoirs, I mean, there's no reason, we're getting upper 40s. Why aren't we getting them over 50? I don't know.
I don't know either. Do you feel like is there any element of the size of the fishery in relation to the size potential of the fish?
Somewhat, but there's the forage bases there.
The bluegills in Brushy Creek are insane.
Yeah, I mean,
Tons of
and
them.
like McBride's got shad, Pleasant Creek, shad are coming back, Hawthorne, some of these other lakes, Big Creek, plenty of forage base.
But those aren't really staggering lakes. I mean, they're
No.
I think at the biggest a couple thousand acres, if not.
Yeah, Big
below that.
Creek probably. 1,000 acres, 1,200.
So I know that a lot of times when you look at some of the lakes in Wisconsin that seem to have numbers of short fish, they're generally small lakes, and you get those larger flowages. You get the Mille Lacs, you get the Leech, the Lake of the Woods. That has the just general biomass and
Sure.
places where they can go where they're not going to encounter an angler. I mean, being caught doesn't stunt a fish, right?
No. And some of those lakes in Wisconsin, those little pothole lakes in northern Wisconsin, 200-acre lakes, I mean, there's 50 inches in those lakes. Biggest fish I've ever seen in the state of Wisconsin came out of, it was a 99-acre lake.
Mm-hmm.
It was 01. My brother and I were fishing the Hodag Muskie Challenge in Rhinelander the next day. We're going to burn fish, didn't want to go out, I'm like, my tournament technique or my tournament plan, you put the boat in the water, you look in the water, you look in the sky. Okay, let's go fishing. You're fishing regardless.
Right.
So, we fished this other lake up just outside of Woodruff the day before, and I was using a little 6-inch Hughes River white glider lake, 100-acre lake with Cisco in it. And this fish followed that bait, and that was the longest fish I'd seen by far in Wisconsin at the time. Well,
you wonder sometimes if what was that the fish? Was that the catfish hunter
Right.
of that lake?
Of that lake. Of that lake, that could have been. I can't imagine many fish in that lake bigger than that one. Yeah.
The musky fishing community is among the most passionate, and I commend them for that. And let's do our best to maintain it. But as we kind of navigate this forward-facing sonar timeline, let's look back at mapping. Let's remember that there were other technologies introduced that
Side imaging
that irritated people. Minnesota tried to ban the flasher way back in the day.
Right.
So I mean, I think there are elements that if we look at the historical take on technological advancements in the sport of fishing and hunting, for that matter, and let's pause. Let's do some studying. Let's not knee jerk and be like ban it all. Let's make it all legal. Let's get some data. Let's get some science behind this. And I don't know. So we're doing a good job here. We're at a good timeline. I don't want to stop immediately, but there's a couple more questions I have for you. And Steve, one of the things that's always impressed me is one of the things I love the most about you is your commitment to everybody else in your boat. And I think that when someone goes fishing with you, they're in for a pretty cool experience. So as we talk about Iowa, that's your home state. That's where you do your guiding. It's not on the Muskie map necessarily, but let's talk a little bit about what people can expect. If they're going to come fish with you, we'll figure that out. But Iowa muskie fishing, why come to Iowa to go muskie fishing?
Number one, aside from the Iowa Great Lakes, Okoboji, Spirit, there's no closed season. We start fishing right at ice out. I would be fishing this weekend. Literally, after the wind and rain we've had recently, we had a little bit of ice left a couple days ago. That's a big thing. The DNR truly in Iowa, they have done a great job stocking and developing these fisheries. Mm-hmm. We're musky fishermen. If a little bit is good, more is better. Yeah.
Well, there is some science there too, and we may not be privy to all the data they have.
But, we've got great fisheries, the opportunity to start early, go late, and catch nice fish. Mm-hmm. We were talking a little bit ago, we're not fishing for 55s. Are 50s available? Oh, yeah. Are they ghosts? Absolutely. But, boy, a 45-inch 25-pounder, a 48-inch 28, 30-pounder.
Ain't nobody turning.
It's a really nice fish.
Do you feel like the general tactic to pursue and catch muskies in Iowa is vastly different? Any different at all? Same thing?
No. Eat, poop, spawn. That's what they do. And the baits that work here in Minnesota, they work in Wisconsin, they work in Iowa. Back in the day, we were throwing mag dogs, catching, 36 inchers, catching 34 inchers. We're going to start throwing pounders, catch bigger fish. No, we're throwing pounders in Iowa, catching 34 and 36-inch fish. Mm-hmm.
You got to get a T-shirt made. Eat, poop, spawn. That'd be a great T-shirt.
That's all they do. We give them all this, thinking, and they can't reason. Mm-hmm. They're a big dumb animal.
God, they're frustrating sometimes.
Or we are the big dumb animal.
There's also that component too. So the area that you spend your time fishing.
I'm in eastern Iowa.
Eastern Iowa.
Yep.
How many lakes do you have access to?
We've got 2, 3 fairly close. You can maybe add 4. A couple of them are newer. The DNR's done some renovations on a couple of them recently. Well, in the last 10 years. But it's casting, it's trolling, it's jigging. Follow them. One of the lakes is 4 lakes in one. It's a reservoir, but you got the 2 ends are shallow, dark water. You got a mixed section that's more pelagic by the dam, deeper, sharper breaks. You got the southern part that's more lake-like humps, weed lines. But pretty much everything. Mm-hmm. The shad throw a little different, mix in the equation, but
I feel like the body structure of those shad fish is usually pretty impressive.
Awesome. The only, a couple of them, while the one had them back in the day, the size structure, the body structure, the fish on Mille Lacs, comparable. Mm-hmm. They're eating shad, they're eating tulaby, or Cisco, big, greasy, oily,
high-calorie fish. Yeah.
You bet. They grow fast and they grow really thick. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So if you're going to launch the boat and you need to go catch a fish, what's your first presentation you're going to pull out the box?
What time of year? Ice out? Or you tell me what time of year.
Well, let's start with ice out. We'll do ice out in summer.
Ice out, I'm probably going to throw a 6-inch squirrely phantom. I'm going to work it really erratic with a lot of up, down, side, side, but not a whole lot of forward movement, if that makes sense. So I'm not working it fast. Hang time. Another one would be probably Red October tube.
You like those. I know that
do.
for a fact.
And I would probably be throwing a shallow rig, even if I was fishing deeper water. Depending though, right at ice out, it's almost like where we left off last December. The shad are out deep over open water. They're not back in the coves yet, and so it's almost like late fall fishing kind of. We talk. You always talk early season. Everybody's throwing small baits, 6-inch twitch baits and little bucktails, and I don't believe in that. I still throw some of that stuff based situationally. But I think a lot of that comes from, it's a myth. The early written word was from those guides in Wisconsin and those guys fishing walleyes early and contacting muskies, or fishing the weed beds and, for bass and contacting muskies, whatnot. I hear the thing, the bait fish are smaller in the spring. What about the last 2 years year classes?
That's right. That's funny.
Did they eat them all? There's none left.
There's a few of them that figure out how to stay alive.
Right. But, there was a deal that's spring of 78. Okay, back I had released that first fish the fall before. We're up in the spring. It's opening weekend. We're getting our work done, whatnot. We go to the Pelican Lake store. Get an ice cream cone. Well, of course, there's tackle hanging up there. There's this sucker-colored teddy bait. I had to have it. I begged and pleaded my grandpa, so he buys me this teddy bait. So I hook it onto this red 5000. Now I got 25-pound strand with the old head and pal. Go a couple doors down. I'm fishing off the neighbor's dock. My parents are inside talking to the neighbors. This is a classic, dude. So I'm chucking this. You got to remember the gear ratio on those reels is super low.
Right. It's like 4-to-1 or something.
Right. Yeah. So I'm casting this bait and I'm working this jerk bait. So it's probably barely moving out of there. Well, I get a fish. And it's a decent fish. It was probably, thinking back, probably low 40s or so. My drag's locked down. 25-pound line. I'm hanging on to this thing at the end of the dock, screaming bloody murder for somebody to come help me. The back hook pulls out of the bait. The bait comes flying up, hits me right between the freaking eyes on my forehead. Immediate goose egg. I'm 10 years old. I'm crying. I go into the house, and they see this big goose egg. What happened? A big musky. So maybe that was one of those instances.
Yes.
But, dude, if that thing hits me in the eye, my eye's gone. I lose my eye. A torpedo-style jerkbait.
Spiraled.
Spiral right between the freaking lookers. Yeah.
I would call that impact, both physically and physiologically.
I don't know.
Like
I don't know if I had a concussion from that one.
But they'll do that to you.
I still remember that like it was yesterday.
So your let's do your Iowa summer bait and then finish it up with your Iowa fall bait.
You know what? The last couple of years, 3-4 years, I kind of gotten into trolling. I always said I was too ADHD to troll, and I did troll some here or there situationally. But I tell you what, I'm into it. 2 reasons. A, the efficiency, unmatched. Whether, I'm running, you can buy a third line in Iowa. I buy the third line. Clients can use 2 lines. I can run 5-6 lines by myself. I mean, with clients and that I can handle, But boy, Supernatural big baits have been an absolute
Such a great
game
lure.
changer.
Yep.
Ridgeway Customs, small bait manufacturer out of Iowa, over by Des Moines. Matt makes an awesome bait. Big fat minnow bait.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I troll the 10 inchers. You know, Chaos Medusas, the Poseidon, and then Red October tubes.
Mm-hmm. Those seem to be a mainstay all year, even into the fall.
Yeah, you can work them top to bottom. You know, you can cover the entire water column.
You know, I kind of feel like this is a good time to tell everybody, if you're listening to this, Steve and I already have a couple dates on the books.
We do.
And we're going to film a segment of In-Fisherman TV talking about this central to upper Midwest trolling thing. So this is a pretty cool technique. I wouldn't say that it's groundbreaking, but it's unique enough that it takes a special touch and some knowledge, especially on the local waters. But watch for that in 2026. Number one fall bait. And then I've got one question after that. Number one fall bait in Iowa.
Number one fall bait in Iowa?
Red October tube.
Tube,
bud.
T-O-O-B.
I think I knew the answer to that. All right, one last story. I just thought of this a little bit ago. I think it would be ignorant of me to not bring this up, but if you're a musky fanatic and you love topwater, there's a really good chance there's a Weaggle in your box.
Yes.
And this is a part of Steve
Weaggle or 3.
You may not know this, but Steve is one of the brainchilds behind the Weaggle that I feel like was largely tested in Iowa.
Well, you know, it was born. The Weaggle was born in Iowa. We had a couple buddies. A couple buddies of mine came down. We were fishing. A couple other buddies were fishing the Clear Lake tournament that spring, Saturday tournament. They got done with the tournament. They came down Cedar Rapids way the next day. And if I remember right, Sean Kellett was throwing a wobble that wasn't weighted enough. So it was on the surface, sloshing back and forth. And I think he caught a 37, a 43, and a 44 or something like that.
From a busted-ass bait.
From a bait that wasn't running like it was supposed to. Because Steve Cady had already made a Weaggle, but the Weaggle he made had the screw eye was up under the chin. So it was kind of like a jackpot on steroids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Two totally different baits. A jackpot's what I call a head bobber. Mm-hmm. When you work it, it's bobbing like a Zara spook, doing, doing, doing. The Weaggle was a slosher. When you hit that thing, the tail's throwing water, and that thing is staying, horizontal in the water, riding a little lower in the water. But that's when the Weaggle was born. That day. And then it was like ding, ding, ding. And, through a chain of events, we had a couple, made like kind of we wanted and started throwing them, and it was game on.
Was there any like prototype developments you had to go through?
But,
straightforward.
The problem with the baits, not problem initially, they were maple. They were made out of hard maple. So we were ordering 1,000 blanks at a time. Mm. The baits, the blank had to weigh between X and X, raw, because after you get the hardware, the paint, the coating, the primer, all that stuff, just added weight. Mm-hmm. And can't have baits sink, topwater baits sinking. So we could, of 1,000 blanks, maybe be able to use 200 to make Weaggles.
Really?
Oh, you'd put them in the oven, have to dry them out.
Could you tell with the blanks if it was going to be a...
No, you had to weigh every single one of them.
Okay.
And at the time, it had to be between 103 and 107 grams. Yeah.
How about that?
Which was crazy.
So what'd you do with the extra blanks you didn't use?
We made Weaggles, or wobbles. The glider jerkbait kind of, which didn't sell a fraction of what the Weaggle did. Mm-hmm. So... unbeknownst to the masses, at the time, we're looking for another hardwood, something that could be more consistent. That if we order 1,000 blanks, we're making 1,000 Weaggles. Mm-hmm. Well, enter poplar. The Weaggle was changed over to poplar from hard maple. Yeah, it's kind of funny. A lot of guys online, they talk about the Katie Weagles, and they don't even know the name of the musky nut, the original company.
Right.
But
You know,
they think that they're all hard maple, and it's like, no, halfway through,
so
we had to go to poplar.
They would start sinking.
They wouldn't sink, but
Run.
they just ran too low in the water, or when you hit them, they would kind of dart under the water.
I think I might have a maple Weaggle. I bought one years and years ago. It's a redhead jailbird finish.
Then it should. That's a Mojo, probably.
Is it?
That should be a poplar.
Okay,
one.
poplar. I just know that one in particular, when I've worked it after a period of time, it tends to.
Is it taken on? Is it got exposed wood?
I think it might. Yeah, it's got the good hook rash.
A couple of them that I have that have some serious hook rash, it'll take on water.
Okay, that might be what it is.
Yeah.
Hey, so maybe during the winter when you're maintaining your musky baits, put another coat of lacquer on it. But so
Sally Hansen's clears tough as nails.
You proved a bait that impacted the musky industry in the state of Iowa. I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that was pretty cool being a part of that whole deal. And Steve Cady was great. What a character. We had so much fun. We were literally living out of his trailer at Break on the Lake Resort on Cass Lake. Had a little shop attached that we tried to keep, not too humid. It had to stay warm enough. You're coating baits, and the baits, they're still tacky. Oh, my God, we got to redo them. Yeah.
There's a video. I still probably have it in my collection. The Bad Fish Outdoors video.
Oh, sure.
That you and Katie were fishing together for a segment of that.
Yeah.
I'm like, I know this guy.
Good times.
A lot of water under the bridge, Steve. But if one thing's the same, you are. I will give you props. I don't feel like you've changed an iota.
Thanks, man.
Since all the years we've known each other, and I think that's a great part of you.
No, what you see is what you get. Try to be true to yourself. That's it.
And the man loves musky fishing. So if you want to have an experience and maybe don't have the mojo time or drive or whatever to make it all the way to Minnesota, go to Iowa. And if they want to find you.
Well, in Iowa, but also because we get warm water, probably typically second, third week of June in Iowa where it's hitting 80 degrees. I've started, back to my roots, running trips up in Vilas County. Vilas, Langlade, and Oneida counties in Wisconsin.
Legendary musky counties.
July and August, basically.
So you stay busy throughout the season.
So, yeah, I mean, boy, I want to work. I want to work as much as I can. I love it.
How do they find you?
Facebook, Steve Jonesi Fishing, LLC, period. There was one that got hijacked. Imagine that.
Trolls.
Right. SteveJonesiFishing.com. Facebook, Steve Jonesi. I'm pretty much out there.
He's out there, easy to find.
Right.
He is boat hooked up and ready to go. And I'm serious about the T-shirt. Eat Poop Spawn sounds good.
I did have another idea. My $1 million. Everybody's got a $1 million idea. My $1 million idea came from Steve Cady, actually, because we'd be out fishing and it'd be tough. He'd be like, stupid fish. I'm like, dude, you're onto something. A T-shirt, stupid fish, ! You could sell them in every resort town in the country. All you got to do is change a fish. Wisconsin, musky. Minnesota, musky, walleye, bass.
It's not a bad idea.
Yeah, somebody's going to take it. Give me a piece if you do. That's
hey. Eat poop spawn.
Eat poop spawn.
I think I can relate to that. Hey, thanks for being here, Steve Jonesi. Gosh, it was so much fun.
I appreciate it, man.
I appreciate you. Yeah, we'll definitely do this again. Hopefully, we're going to be on the water again soon, and maybe we can do an Iowa rendition of In-Fisherman Storyline.
Sounds good to me.
Hey, thanks for being here, everybody. We'll catch you on the next one. See you later.